Hello everyone, and welcome back to another edition of Index Office Hours. Today is the 19th of August, and this is Index Office Hours 221. Let me just post the agenda in the chat there so everyone can follow along. If anyone is new to Index Office Hours, this is the town square where graph ecosystem participants come together and discuss the most important and relevant topics for indexes. As always, this is a conversation and we do love participation, so feel free to get involved in today's conversation via voice or text. And if you have any challenges with that, let me know and I'll get that sorted for you. Indeed, this is a conversation. We do love participation. As a reminder, this session is going to be recorded and posted onto public channels like YouTube. If you are concerned about privacy, please bear that in mind. And let's get the show on the road. So as always, I will hand over to Carlos for our regularly scheduled report section.
Hey everyone, and welcome again. This week was also, again, quite quiet. We do have one new release for 𝗨𝗀𝗂𝗧 v2. It's now at 0.2.17. It has not that many changes, but one seems like a meaningful bug fix. So please update. Over Launchpad, we have two charts. 𝗨𝗀𝗂𝗧 v2 just keeping up with upstream, and a new release for proxyd, which does have some relevant default config changes and improvements, like increasing batch sizing and stuff like that. So if you're using it, you're probably going to benefit from updating. And we have on the graph stack, graph node 0.40.0 was released. I know that we're going to talk more at length on this later, so just a very brief overview. There is a critical bug fix, and there are some new features like IPFS caching. It's quite exciting, and I'll just remind you, it's still not on the feature matrix as officially supported, so take that into account according to your policy. And that's all for this week. I will hand over to Abel now then for the protocol watch.
Yes, indeed, it does look short today, so happy to hop into it. So as for forum governance, no updates since the last IOH, and that is also true for forum research as well. There seems to be a line item here for contracts repository, and it is linked in the agenda. As for the network subgraphs, the core network subgraph, the analytics sub. Okay, wow. Okay, I was reading it now. Pretty much no updates since the last IOH. So it looks like it's probably one of the fastest protocol watch sections we've had thus far. So that's pretty much it. And now I will be handing over to Packer.
Hi, everyone. We had our Sepolia report pass the tab last week. So we'll work on a GGP for Chapel and Sepolia. So that will go to the council next week. So if you're wanting to run infra for that, it should hopefully pass the council vote since it got passed through the tab. So I'll post some updates when I get more of a clear timeline in the indexer channel for everybody. And we're testing Unichain, and that's looking good as well. So when I have more timely updates on that one, I will definitely let you know. And that's it.
Alrighty. And then there's a question here from Matthew just asking about disputes. I've just responded there saying doesn't look like it according to the agenda, but I will follow up with Juan and try and get an answer to you on that there. Okay, so now we will move on to the next section. And we have the good fortune of having some experts on GraphNode and Postgres with us today. We've got Lotte, John, and Derek, and they'll be leading a Postgres AMA as well as a presentation on the latest updates on GraphNode. So if anyone has any burning questions in relation to Postgres or something they've been, it's been challenging for them, this is the conversation for you. So without further ado, I will hand over to Lotte, who's going to take us into a presentation on the latest updates for GraphNode.
All right, thanks. amazing sound effect. Yeah, so I just threw some slides together with stuff that, yeah, sort of off the top of my head, things that have changed recently. And it's not by no means comprehensive. These are mostly changes that somehow have to do with database things, so I thought they would be good to mention here. Yeah, so those are like the 5 things I'll talk about in a little more detail. The first one is something that's been requested for a long time, because when you run a sharded setup, there are certain tables that are maintained in each shard, so it's really hard to get an overview of what's going on in those tables. And yeah, as of probably a couple months ago, GraphNode now creates this namespace sharded that basically unions all those tables together, and yeah, you can use that for Grafana or other like queries. It can be, if you have a lot of shards, querying those tables can be really slow, because Postgres needs to go to each shard and pick out some data. But I mean, it's also pretty convenient when it's fast enough. One thing to be careful with is GraphNode runs migrations automatically, right? Whenever we have a database migration, and the GraphNode code will actually first drop this namespace, then run the migration, then recreate it, so that changes in those migrations don't get held up by or don't fail because those views that are in the sharded namespace still depend on those tables we want to change. So if you want to do something manually, you should drop this sharded namespace and later recreate it. Or I think GraphNode creates it automatically when it starts. If it's not there, I have to double check that. All right, that's the sharded stuff. That was something I've been meaning to do for a really long time. We've had this subgraph deployment table that had all kinds of metadata about deployment, from like the IPFS hash to the subgraph, where the subgraph head is, to like crazier stuff like errors, and there's all kinds of stuff in there. We've seen in the hosted service quite a few problems with this subgraph deployment table, because when you have a long-running transaction, that table gets bloated because it gets written to a lot, and Postgres can't clean out old rows until the long-running transaction has finished. And so I split that table into 2. One, the table called head, that just contains the stuff that actually gets updated on every block for every subgraph, which is basically the subgraph head pointer and like the firehose cursor. It's a very small amount of data. And then everything else goes into the subgraphs.deployment table. That's mostly important if you have your own dashboards. This update, you probably noticed, will have broken all your dashboards, but you can sort of fix them by querying either the subgraphs.head or subgraphs.deployment or both tables to get the same data back. Okay, copying. We've been doing a lot of copying in the hosted service in our databases, and as part of that, I wrote a lot of code that speeds up copying and makes it a little more manageable if you have a lot of copies going on. As you know, probably copying happens in batches. Like we try to figure out how many rows basically we can copy in one transaction to avoid long-running transactions because of this subgraph deployment issue we had on the previous slide. And that estimation could go terribly wrong in some cases. So there's a much better estimation algorithm now, and batch sizes should be much more appropriate to stay within the window of how long a batch should take. Also, there's now sort of a kill switch where if a batch takes way too long, we just abort that batch, reset the batch size to 1, and then try again. Copying is now parallelized, so a subgraph or a copy operation can copy multiple tables in parallel. The user interface, that hasn't really changed. You still use grafman copy create to start a copy and copy status to see how far it's gotten. Of course, all these things, copying also applies to grafting. So all these changes should also make grafts faster and more manageable. And yeah, there's a bunch of environment settings you can set.
Letter,
So the first one, sorry, was there a
can
question?
can I just add one thing? Oh, you're going over the config settings. Just to add one thing, because I just did a graft like 2 weeks ago or something, and normally that graft took like 5 or 6 days for the whole thing, because it was a pretty beefy subgraph. But I was looking at the logs, and I was literally watching it like copy over, 8 or 9 tables at once, and the whole thing finished in like an hour or two. It was amazing.
Nice. Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. I mean, that's similar to what I've seen. It can really speed up copies a lot. So that the first setting, the batch target duration, that's just how long should a batch of copies take. The default is 3 minutes, which should be good enough for everything. You can experiment with longer target durations, but I don't think you'll get much of a speed up out of it. The batch timeout, that's the thing that if a batch takes longer than that, that's sort of the protection against really long running transactions, right? Like if in the past when things went wrong, you could have a batch take 12 hours, and it would really screw up your database because of the bloat in subgraph deployment. So we set that, I think, to about 3 times the target duration. So or 5 times. Yeah, I think it's 5 times. So 15 minutes. So if a batch takes 15 minutes, we're just like, okay, this is never going to finish. Kill this and start again with a batch that just copies a single row, and then after that it tries to increase the batch size automatically until it hits something that does take 3 minutes. The batch workers, that's the setting that Derek needed for the parallelized copying. That determines for each subgraph how many tables can be copied in parallel. So if you set this to 5 or 10, you'd get like 5 tables, 10 tables that can be copied in parallel. Another setting that really helps with copy speed is this postpone attribute index creation. As you know, we create a lot of indexes on tables. And maybe John can talk a little bit later about how to get rid of those indexes, because they do slow things down and do take a lot of storage. But if you set this thing to true, then most of the indexes we have on tables only get created after we're done copying data. And because during the copy, then Postgres doesn't have to insert in all these indexes, that speeds up copies tremendously. If you're ever like in a pinch, you can also manually drop indexes and recreate them. It can have a huge impact on how fast Postgres can write data. The one caveat is gist indexes, leave them alone for now, because they can take catastrophically long to recreate, like days. But B-tree indexes are totally fair game, and that's what this setting does. B-tree indexes don't get created until all the data has been copied over, which helps with the copy speed. To really get the most out of parallel copies, you also in the graphnode.toml you need to set this FDW pool size. That basically says how many copies in parallel can be happening in total. So the batch workers is just how much a single subgraph can use. The FDW pool size is basically the total parallelism you can have across everything. And you want to set that to as big as possible. You need to keep an eye on how many connections you're already using in your Postgres instances, and how much headroom you basically have in terms of connections, because you don't want to run out of set this so big that you run out of connections. That was that for this slide.
And how do you suggest finding the sweet spot for batch workers?
I yeah, I haven't done any sort of rigorous testing. I think I just blindly set it to like 5 in the hosted service. But I mean, if you know you're going to copy a subgraph with like 10 tables, you might want to set this to 10 so all the tables can be copied in parallel. But yeah, a lot of times, yeah, the copy is slowed down by a handful of tables. So yeah, but I would say 5 to 10 is probably a good good setting. Nope, there's nothing spicy. Vince, what do you mean with something spicy for query nodes? In terms of like
Just
speeding up
like,
I
you know,
think
query?
the kind of unknown flags, I guess, or the things that people aren't using. If there's anything there for query nodes as well.
Yeah, I haven't. Yeah, I haven't prepared anything for that. I don't know if maybe Derek has some recommendations.
yeah, there's the section in the environment variables for GraphQL caching. And so that can just help your query cache actually hit cache. There's certain things inside of there. And then also there's the GraphQL section, which I think it has, God, there's one environment variable for like the total number of entities in, that's being stored in cache. And I think the default value is set to like 10 megabytes or something. But do you know by chance, is that 10 megabytes per subgraph, or is that per node, like per query node?
On the query cache? Do you mean the
No,
query cache?
no, there was something about like an entity cache. Oh,
Oh,
maybe that's more for
that's on the
handlers.
indexing. That cache is on the
Yeah,
indexing side.
yeah.
Yeah, I haven't done any rigorous performance testing, but I think 10 megabytes is just fine. Basically just want to batch up enough writes so that Postgres has like a reasonably big write to do every time you actually write to it. And from what I've seen, 10 megs seem to be okay, seem to be enough to achieve that. Like if you set this bigger and bigger, there's diminishing returns
Sure.
for larger batches, and you risk that when you restart graph node, like everything that's still in memory, of course, has to be redone. The graph entity cache size, that's on the right side. I think 10 megs is totally fine for it. Yeah, a
Yeah, and
long
then
time
on the
ago, on the query stuff, a long time ago, I wrote up this gist that is a gist for really bad reasons and not in the official docs. But there's one, I don't know if you guys know about the query tracing. You can basically pass a header to a GraphQL query, and then it'll include some information about the query execution in the response. Like it lists each of the SQL queries that were run and how long each of those queries took. That's a really useful tool when you have a slow query and you want to figure out which part of the GraphQL query is taking a long time. And then you have a SQL example that you can then look at and try to figure out if there's indexes that would speed up that particular SQL query. And the other thing is, because the configuration of the query caching is really is a little complicated. And this tries to explain how all that works and what happens behind the scenes with the various settings for query caching. Okay, back to this thing here. So that was all I had about copying and parallelizing copying. Another thing is that pruning's seen some improvements. There's this global setting, the min history blocks, which determines for subgraphs that have like the pruning hint order in it, how much history will actually keep, and the default is twice the reorg threshold. There's also this slack factor, which what that does is once a subgraph is pruned and it's sort of indexing block by block, in theory, to stay within that min history, you would have to, on every block, you would have to delete a little bit from it so it doesn't get too big. But that's sort of stupid. You want to do these deletes, this cleanup of the history less frequently than on every block. So the slack factor says, you can accumulate this much more history than the min history block setting says. The default is 1.2, but you can set that to much bigger, like 4 or something like that. So if you set to 4, it means, say min history blocks is set to 500 blocks. If you set the slack factor to 4, that means only after a subgraph has accumulated 2,000 blocks of history are we going to go and actually delete history. And that sort of reduces the amount of overall work that has to be done to keep subgraphs pruned. There's been a little bit of an improvement in the command line. There used to be a graphman prune command that did everything in the foreground, and was for slow prunes. Like some prunes can take 12 hours or so. Was really finicky because if the command got interrupted, you had to restart, and it would still take a long time. So now you can either call graphman prune run, which does the prune in the foreground like it used to do, or you just call graphman prune set, that just sets the history threshold of a specific subgraph. And then the actual prune will happen in the background, and you don't have to sit around and wait. But since it's happening in the background, you need something to show you what's happening with prunes, and that's what graphman prune status does. And it shows you while a prune is running, or for the last prune, what happened. How long the prune took when it ran, and stuff like that. For pruning, there's sort of two strategies, right? Like when GraphNode looks at a table and says, "Oh, we need to get rid of some of the table," it can either rebuild the table. Basically, you copy everything in the table that you want to keep to a new table and then swap tables around, or it can delete things, which is just like you delete from that table where all the stuff that's too old. That's what the R and D in the status are. R means we're rebuilding the table, and D means we're deleting. The reason is that if you get rid of roughly more than 50% of a table, rebuilding is much faster than just deleting from it. And so the status for tables that get rebuilt just shows you how many rows were copied, and for deleting, it shows you how many rows were deleted. All the data that graphman prune status shows is in these two database tables. So if you want to dashboard those, have at it by just looking at those two tables.
Letter, one question for on the prior slide, you had like 2 times reorg. Different chains have different amount of blocks necessary in order to finalize on the chain. Is that 2 times reorg? Is that reorg value different per chain?
Nope. Yeah.
Or is
no,
that something?
that's also I mean it's not it's a limitation that's been there since forever, that there's only a global setting for reorg threshold. It's also an environment variable that you set, and that gets used for everything. So yeah.
Okay, but if you have multiple index nodes, you could have one that's assigned to all of the Ethereum subgraphs. You could have another one assigned to Arbitrum subgraphs. They could have their own unique values. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, in practice, it doesn't matter so much whether you set this history, the min history to 500 or 1,000 blocks, or maybe even 2,000. What matters is that that's different from 10 million blocks of history.
Sure.
All right, and then a couple small things. There's a command that I found very useful when I was doing all the copying, this graphman chain ingest. What that does is it makes sure that a certain block is in the block cache and we only have one of those in the block cache. So when a graph node encounters a fork while it's processing a chain, it keeps both blocks that it saw as part of the fork in the block cache. And then, for example, when you set up want to start a copy, then the copy command complains that there's two blocks with the same block number and it doesn't know which one to use as the real one. Or it can also happen that the block hash doesn't have a certain block that copy wants to start at. You also get an error, and so this chain ingest command is really useful for cleaning up those problems with the block cache. The other thing that I encountered with mass copying, if you have a lot of parallelism, a lot of connections, a lot of copies going, is that graph nodes seem to freeze up in some places. And that has to do with blocking threads. I don't know how deep we want to go into how Tokyo works. But the long and short of it is that the default setting for these blocking threads can be too low. And so there's a new environment variable where you can bump that up. So if you ever see graph node seemingly just stop at something for seconds, a minute, it might be worth just trying setting that to something bigger like 2K or something like that. All right, and that's all I had, but I'm sure there's lots of other questions about other things. And I mean, John and Derek, I'm sure can jump into with things.
Amazing. Thank you so much. That was incredible. So yeah, as Lotta said, now is the time to talk all about Postgres, GraphNode. Any questions? Maybe John or Derek, if you have anything you want to start off with, feel free to. Otherwise, we can just get straight into Q&A. It's kind of up to you guys.
Yeah, I think we started going over a few things last week. I would say let's start with kind of Q&A, and then we can start going down the rabbit hole as the questions cause us to do that.
Fantastic. Let's do it. So, folks, fire away. Any questions on anything that was discussed there, or just GraphNode, Postgres in general?
If there's no questions,
I
go
guess I
ahead.
have one question. Where I know we've talked about it for a long time about EdgeNode sharing dashboards. Is that still in the works for Postgres, shards, all that stuff?
Yeah, I'm not sure where that is. I haven't followed up with what's happening there for a while. I need to look into it. Yeah, I don't. I mean, informally, I know I've given some dashboards to people. I don't know if there's a collection anywhere where they get reshared.
Yeah, it's kind of just internal sharing right now because, like you said, the sharded piece broke kind of the mainstay dashboards that everyone was kind of sharing and using. So everyone kind of broke off and built their own that worked with that piece, and sharing around with friends. But there's no real set dashboards for anything now.
Mickey's just asked in the chat which dashboards would be the most helpful. Maybe it might be interesting to hear that. So maybe you can collect some and share. Okay, every single one of them. I see Mickey's.
All right. Identifying which subgraphs are causing heavy load. I think the best bet there is PG stat statements, which sort of is a cumulative view of which measures how long queries took and surfaces which queries are really, really slow. And then just, has everybody looked at, or do people use pgstat statements? It's super, super helpful. Yeah, I don't know, Nate, if that answers the question.
You talking like over a historical period, like, days, weeks, months, or just like what the load is right now as something really busy?
Yeah.
I think over time is the intent. I mean, ultimately, indexers
Yeah.
want to be able to see, I'm indexing these 1,000 subgraphs. 900 of them are tiny. These 50 are medium, and this one over here is using up a ton of my resources, and it's not getting queries, for example. Right? That might be one that an indexer would want to drop. But being able to identify, okay, well, which one is in which bucket would be important.
Yeah. PGStat activity shows you what's going on right now. PGStat statement sort of accumulates statistics of how long queries took. So both of them are really useful. If you want to know right now why is CPU load really high, then PGStat activity is really useful. For figuring out which subgraphs are really heavy, there's also a view info.subgraph sizes that gets refreshed, I think, every 6 hours or so. It's a materialized view which has information about the storage size of subgraphs. And storage size generally is a pretty good proxy for how heavy a subgraph is to index. Right? Like basically, if it writes a lot of data, it's probably also fairly costly in other aspects. That often is my go-to for finding piggish subgraphs.
If you've got access to your logs, then pgBadger is possibly the best tool ever created for this, because you'll be able to go back and take a look at, most frequent queries, longest running queries by, average length of time. You can see what queries are perhaps using up all of your RAM, so that like the sorts are happening on disk and things like that. So you might need to tweak settings that way. So from just a straight Postgres standpoint, and not from a graph node standpoint, pgBadger and your logs are phenomenal for this. And I haven't tried it yet, but I'm really interested in taking a look at a fairly recent tool called pgNow, which a few of my former colleagues shared with me a while back, but I haven't had a chance to try and hook it up to anything, but it looks kind of promising.
I mean, we also have Prometheus metrics on the graph node side. There's one that reports how long it took to process a block. I think you could try some, but I have never done like aggregate anything clever with aggregate Prometheus queries, right? Like find the top 10 worst things here or something like that. But these metrics exist. You'd have to probably use Prometheus built-in browser to find them. I don't know if there's good documentation for those.
There's lots of magic you can do with pgstat tables. On another note, what happens if I clear out the cache on my blocks table? How bad would that be?
If you
because it's like terabytes of data, and I'm wondering how much of it we actually need.
It's not great. What will happen is that all the subgraphs that are at chain head will probably wait until. So if you completely clear the block cache, graph node will have to get reorg threshold many blocks from the chain before it can proceed. So it'll get like by default like 250 blocks from from the RPC or Firehose to repopulate the block cache with just those 250 blocks. So it's probably not terrible. Yeah, I know that Jim and I think Marc-André, like 𝗨𝗂𝗂𝗧𝗂 also does that quite regularly.
I just typed out my question because I didn't want to interrupt you with talking, but
Yeah, James,
a follow up from there.
I've never tried it. Yeah, what would happen? But yeah, you would have to delete or you would have to update. Yeah, it would be very, very slow, I think, because you're rewriting pretty much the whole table, right? If you do something like update set data equals null, and I'm not entirely sure what will happen. We did some work to improve the block cache, to sort of split it into two tables where one is just the headers and one is the actual blocks to make that a little to improve that. But yeah, that isn't done, that work.
Ooh, when is that coming?
Yeah, good question. I don't know. It's with the recent changes we've had, that work is sort of a little orphaned.
And sorry to pepper you with a bunch of questions. And then what if we just had the GraphMan prune to keep just the most recent 250 blocks? Is it still a problem? I'm just like kind of thinking with what you're saying as I
pruning only affects subgraphs. It doesn't do anything for the block cache.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so the downside of pruning is twofold. One is, of course, you can't serve queries that ask for historical data, right? Like you don't have that data. The other one is that if people try to graft, you can't graft onto a block that's already pruned. That's those are the two downsides of pruning. It limits how far back you can graft, and it limits how far back queries can go.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question. James at Data Nexus has been very generous with his time with me looking at Wave5's Postgres databases and helping me understand how you might go about pruning like a 90 terabyte database. And I'll be honest with you, it's really bloody complex. I'm interested to know if you guys have any plans to bring some kind of feature in that would allow us to do that natively, by which all I mean is that some sort of, maybe GraphMan or some sort of tooling within the like graph tool set that helps you identify subgraphs that you could prune or completely get rid of, which is what I'm really trying to do. I'm trying to get rid of just useless stuff in my database. I'm just interested to know if there's anything like that on the roadmap, or if you even feel like it's like within the remit of the software, or if it's just something you would expect a Postgres admin to deal with.
Yeah, good question. I mean, so one thing we do or did, at least in the hosted service, is you can have GraphNode log GraphQL queries. Just like every time it gets a GraphQL query, it logs, and then you look at those logs to see which subgraphs actually get queries, and make your pruning decisions based on that. Right, like if something hasn't gotten a query in 30 days or something like that, based on your logs, just nuke it. I don't know if there's better ways. I mean, the gateway knows what it's sending queries to, but it's not. Yeah, there's nothing in GraphNode directly that would help you to find unused subgraphs. And is the 90 terabytes you have, is it all subgraph data or mostly subgraph data, or is there a lot of block caches too?
That's 2 or 3 shards. The block cache, I think our block cache is like 15 terabytes, maybe. I think base is half of that, maybe. Base is huge.
Yeah, that tends to be really big, yeah, base. Yeah, Derek, are there any public summaries, metrics from the gateway about what it's seeing queries for? I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
I mean, a lot of the stuff that we've been doing is super manual, right? So we'll query the quality of service subgraph and we'll just check and see, like, okay, for all the deployments that are in our database, either A, does it have signal? At which point it's important because we may want to claim index or rewards on it. We've tried fudging with that, like, does it have sufficient amount of signal? But even if we just use, does it have any signal, or does it have query traffic? Maybe it has both. That's kind of the ideal scene. But if something has one or the other, then it's at least somewhat useful from the perspective of I'm an indexer and we like to make money. If it doesn't meet those two things, the only other time where it might have some value is if it's a graphed base. And we've kind of started to lean more and more between just saying, well, if it ends up being a graph base, then we'll tackle that down the road type of thing. But for now, if it doesn't have signal and it doesn't have queries, we should probably just remove it entirely. Then you go into the question of like, okay, maybe something has signal, but it has no queries anytime recently, right? Those ones, if they get bloated, that might be a really good subgraph to prune, right? There's not a lot of stuff happening inside of there. They're probably, by definition, they're not running any time traveling queries. And so long as you don't need to constantly do rewinds in order to fix the subgraph, then you might want to prune that one. You might want to get rid of the different indexes on columns that aren't necessary. If a subgraph has queries and it's useful because of that side of the income machine, then it's kind of treated in a different fashion. But even just like a simple graphman command to say, hey, delete all non-useful indexes, right? That would be all of the indexes on the various attributes on the entity that aren't the
Yeah.
ID, right? Like maybe if there was something like a delete all those other guys or just drop those indexes, that could help indexers reclaim a ton of space after we go through and we determine like, okay, great, this subgraph hasn't had any queries for a year. Let's go delete all of those other indexes. And one command to just kind of, jump through all those would be awesome.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, John, I don't know how usable the stuff is that they use to get rid of unused indexes, but maybe we can share that tool somehow.
Yeah, we should see, how generally applicable it would be
Yeah.
for everybody. Because we're doing something like that. I was going to say it, not it's kind of tongue in cheek here. It's like the three main things that I've found since I started doing this is that dropping indexes is the preventative medicine for everything, that unused indexes. And then what was the other one? Setting account like flags. Whenever anybody says there's a performance problem, it's almost always set account like flags. And then lastly was the little pearl that David shared earlier about using the GraphQL to find out what the query is, and then using explain analyze on it. So those are my big three things in a year. But as far as with indexes go, let's see what we can come up with to share with the community, because it really is something you could just run as a cron job, in my opinion. So
Yeah, and you probably only need to run it like once a week or so.
at most, once you really prune it, drop them, it's pretty minimal. Yeah.
I do a lot of
Yeah,
work on that here. It is. I say a lot. It is something you can do, like once a week or once a month, and save a lot of space on. I can't tell you how many terabytes of data I've saved going through indexes and seeing what's useful and
Absolutely.
what's not.
Yep. And super important to do also as a side note, before copying. all that stuff that Letter went through earlier about copying, the first step should be dropping unused indexes.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, and Jim, another thing is that subgraph sizes. If you look at the info.subgraph sizes view, the size of subgraphs usually follow like a power law. Like, a ton of them are very reasonably sized, like tens of gigabytes, and then you have a few that go into the terabytes. And so my first stop would be to look at that subgraph sizes view and just look at the biggest ones in there. Sorry. And ask yourself if you really want to keep those. You can.
That's what I've got that bit. I've got that bit working with Payne's help after the table upgrades. That definitely helped knock some like 2 terabyte subgraphs out the way that were just doing nothing. But my worry is more about the culmination of 1,000 subgraphs that I just don't need to have that is more than 2 terabytes. It's that having to get into the detail and do an analysis before you make a decision to delete something is the bit that's quite complex, I'm finding anyway.
Any thoughts, questions on the stuff that we discussed? By the way, Pilish posted the poet phrase, so feel free to grab the poet there. Yes. I see Payne is typing. You did want to give a sneak peek into what you're going to be discussing next week. So feel free to do that as well just before we wrap. And if folks have any more questions about GraphNode and Postgres, feel free to pop them in the chat and then we'll get them answered for you. So Payne, if you want to go ahead and maybe give us a little sneak peek for next week, feel free to.
Test. Can you guys hear me?
Yep, loud and clear.
Okay, so yeah, we just wanted to make you all aware about the existence of that tool. Basically, I just vibed it in the last couple of days. It's basically meant to be like a PG admin, but for your terminal, where you can easily connect to multiple databases and just browse tables and execute queries on your own. So if you click onto the views, if you look at the screenshots that I have in there, so basically like if you click on the views within each of those things, then it executes the queries automatically for you. You don't really need to know any SQL to browse the database, but if you want to get into the weeds of it, you can also execute manual queries, and it just gives you the whole table. You can filter by columns, even multiple columns at once. You can also export that into a CSV and do your own analysis, and it asks you if you want to export it with the original data, so basically no filters or no sorting, or just filtered data with sorting. It has like all sorts of functionalities, and if you guys have any improvements or thoughts or feature requests for it, I'm more than happy to try to implement them. But yeah, this was just a sneak peek I wanted to give you about this, but in the next IOH we're going to discuss about this and a couple of other tools that I've built in the last weeks/months. One other one would be DTOP, and the other one would be the iTerm GUI. It's just a simple SSH manager for iTerm. But yeah, hopefully you would find this useful, and if you have any any ideas on how to improve it, feel free to let me know.
Amazing. Appreciate the sneak peek there, and yeah, everyone, make sure you show up for that one. That's going to be a lot of fun. I see a question was asked, and Lotta has responded, which is great. Might be I see Slim is here, so not to put you on the spot, so no need to respond if there is no update. But in case there is one, maybe it might be worth sharing an update on the indexer changes that have been you've been working on with Pain in the indexer experience working group. Maybe there's some updates you want to share. Yeah, feel free to if you have any.
So I see Orion's microphone isn't working, but I can give you an update on this last indexer working group call. We basically had a long session on the existing graph node issues, and we sorted them out, basically improvements or feature requests, and we sorted them out and started tagging them based on their priority, so we can basically prioritize what we feel like it's going to be low-hanging fruit with much impact for indexers. So this is like literally related to making our lives easier. And we're going to continue with that thing in the upcoming indexer experience working group call. So everyone is involved. Everyone is invited to be involved in this. Yeah, that's one of the things we talked about in the call is automating the account like flag, and not only that, but lots of other things that should be very easy to implement. But yeah, feel free to join the Indexer Experience working group calls. We will be a lot more hands-on with the development of the graph node and any features that we want to add. So I think we will definitely make a lot more impact now with this. But yeah, hopefully Orion's microphone is working so he can add on top of.
I think you covered it perfectly, and yeah, I will share the link here in chat momentarily around if you also want to contribute to the Index Experience working group. And yeah, we are going through that. That will be a fixed segment that we will spend some of the time on, and outside of that, we'll also go on do workshops on upcoming improvement proposals, upcoming changes, or go more in depth on some of the topics where we would value some indexer feedback and indexer tools, indexer challenges, and see if we can brainstorm and get an idea of how we can improve being an indexer on the graph. So yeah, I'll share that link in chat. All on my end.
Amazing. Thank you both for the updates there. And yeah, we'll look forward to seeing the link there. I see Derek is typing, so maybe Derek wants to share something. Oh, no longer. No, okay. Cool. Sounds good. Okay, well, any final thoughts, questions, Postgres graph node related, feel free to post in the chat. We'll try and get the questions answered. Okay, sounds good. Yeah, amazing. Yeah, well, if anyone has any questions, feel free to post them in the chat. But if not, then we can take this opportunity to wrap. Thanks for posting the link there, Slim. Appreciate everyone joining for another edition of Index Office Hours, and we look forward to seeing you all again same time next week for another edition of Index Office Hours, where we're going to have Payne telling us all about the cool tools that he's built for the ecosystem. Cool. Take care, everyone. See you next week. Bye-bye.